I think it was really good. I think few things we would like to clarify. What is your take on drugs as a priority, sir? Like right now, we have antiarrhythmics available starting from amiodarone, flecainide, like drugs like beta blockers available. In a pediatric age group, you have any order at which you use drugs in SVTs? Because a lot of neonates and small kids require antiarrhythmics a lot of time. And we know like flecainide is a very good drug available right now, which has an excellent action on most of the arrhythmias. Do you have any like priority wise, like this is the first line, this is the second line? I'm not asking about a particular arrhythmia because in a clinical practice, mostly you have an ECG which shows short heartbeat tachycardia. That's all we know. So in that kind of a scenario, what is your priority list, sir? How you choose to your drug?
Thank you, Lawrence, for that very relevant question. So, like I mentioned in my talk, when you use various drugs to treat arrhythmias, there is no single mantra as to these drugs are better for this arrhythmia and these drugs are better for the other arrhythmia. There's no single mantra like that. And all these drugs act by either affecting refractory period or affecting conduction velocities. So it's, and we also don't know which drug is going to act how and to what extent they're going to affect the limbs of the reentrant circuit. So for that reason, it is sort of not possible to have a uniform algorithm that can be followed in terms of drugs. You try this, then try that. So each person can follow their own, and you can't fault somebody saying my thing is better than somebody else's. In my situation, I usually give off esmolol because that's a great drug to start off with controlling the rates, as well as beta blockers, as we all know, have got antiarrhythmic property. And esmolol's action can be very easily reversed. So you give esmolol and then you stop it within about 30 seconds, the action is reversed. So like I mentioned in the critical care setting, most of the critical care physicians are extremely anxious about starting any of these drugs because their child is already in an arrhythmia, the blood pressures are low. So they are very, very scared when you give an antiarrhythmic. Now, having said that about esmolol, when you look at fetal arrhythmias, there is, the situation where you can be having either atrial arrhythmias or you could be having reentrant circuits, which are usually accessory pathway related. And there is a sort of feeling, one certain school of thought that in fetal arrhythmias, it may be better to give sotalol for the atrial arrhythmias and flecainide for the accessory pathway related arrhythmias. Now, this is just one study. We don't have large number of studies proving this kind of thing. In my individual practice, I generally give IV esmolol first, and then like we mentioned, there are certain substrates where arrhythmias are practically incessant. When you have a large excitable gap with a slowly conducting accessory pathway, or you sometimes have these patients who have atrial arrhythmias. So those situations, sometimes it may take long to control and you sort of mix and match. So sometimes you end up having to start IV, amiodarone. Usually I find flecainide a great drug for atrial arrhythmias. And of course, atrial flutter that some neonates are born with, you cardiovert them once or terminate it once and it never comes back after that. So that's basically how I go about managing my arrhythmias.
John sir, good evening.
Hi. Hi, Jay. Please tell me.
I think, sir, which situation you will prefer to go for transesophageal pacing, sir?
Yeah, so if
we are not prefer to do that, but once you are telling about that, the most of the arrhythmia, I mean continuous pediatric ICU, they will call with a intubated patient only. So two kids, incessant arrhythmia, not able to revert with the drugs. I went for cardioversion. So I'm not keen to go for pacing, transesophageal pacing. Tell me some points about it.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Jayapandyan. That's again a very relevant question. So, like I mentioned, there's a general feeling among pediatricians, and we have a study to support it as well, that cardioversion can cause myocardial depression and sometimes affect myocardial function permanently. Now, the particular study that was published in PACE in 2018, there's about a 5% incidence of myocardial depression seen anywhere between 0 to 90 days of the cardioversion. And this is a purely pediatric population. So that is one of the reasons why generally pediatric electrophysiologists across the world hesitate from cardioverting patients. And like I said, there are certain situations where cardioversion is a great idea. Like you often have neonates born with a persistent atrial flutter, you cardiovert them and they're done once and for all. It doesn't come back after that. But certain reentrant arrhythmias, particularly these PJRTs and atrial flutters, some of the atrial tachycardias, they tend to be incessant. You terminate them, it is back. You cardiovert, again arrhythmia, cardiovert, again arrhythmia. So these kind of situations, and the drug is going to take time to act. It won't act immediately, so it may take 1, 2, 3 days. So one important thing is to achieve rate control. And for rate control, IV esmolol is a great drug. So you give IV esmolol, attain rate control. And once you attain rate control, even if the arrhythmia is continuing, you are reducing the chance of a cardiomyopathy developing, tachy-induced cardiomyopathy, myocardial depression. That reduces once you get your ventricular rates down. So for example, neonates where the rates are 220, 250, 280, you give IV esmolol, bring the rates down to 150. Arrhythmia is still going on at 150, but at least the child will not go into myocardial dysfunction as quickly as it would otherwise. Now, in that kind of situation where you have an reentrant kind of arrhythmia, then transvisual pacing is a great idea because you can put the transvisual pacing catheter there. And whenever you want, you turn on your pacing, terminate the arrhythmia. You can even teach the nurse actually in the ICU to do it. So the nurse who's always by the side of the baby will suddenly see the baby is going to arrhythmia, turn on the pacing, and 10, 15 beats of pacing, arrhythmia stops, turn off pacing. Child will be arrhythmia free for about 15, 20, 25 minutes. Then again, child will go back to arrhythmia. Again, she turns it on, stops it. So in this situation, you're not doing any harm by repeatedly cardioverting the patient, whereas you are terminating the arrhythmia and giving the child as much time as sinus rhythm as possible. So that's the kind of situation where we use transvisual pacing. But transvisual pacing has a greater role in that a lot of children who have arrhythmias, in time that arrhythmia no longer, the pathway just vanishes. Like we said, the most common cause of arrhythmias in children is accessory pathways. And accessory pathways which conduct causing arrhythmias when a child is in utero as well as within 1 year, the vast majority of them stop conducting in 1 to 5 years of age. But once you've documented a tachycardia in a baby, you start them on a drug, you're going to invariably keep continuing the drug forever until the child becomes old enough for you to sort of do an EP study and ablation. So what I have found and what studies have as well shown is that since a large number of these accessory pathways actually stop conducting after some time, it doesn't make sense to keep continuing them on antiarrhythmic drugs. So most of our children who have fetal arrhythmias or neonatal arrhythmias, we document the arrhythmia, we start them on a beta blocker, and then by the time the child is 1 year of age, we actually stop the drug. Stop the drug for about 2 weeks, take the drug child to the EP lab, and then do transvisual pacing, try to reinduce the arrhythmia. So you do programmed atrial pacing, burst atrial pacing, you no longer reinduce the arrhythmia which was incessant earlier, then you know for sure that the pathway has stopped conducting and you can stop the drug. So all these drugs obviously have their own side effects, and you don't want to unnecessarily give flecainide, beta blocker to somebody if the pathway is no longer there. So you can stop it. So that's one situation, great situation where we use transvisual pacing. We've also used it in child who had sick sinus syndrome with very low heart rates. Child had also a sigmoid volvulus needing emergency surgery. And that time we used transvisual pacing to pace the child and take the child up for surgery. So then after the surgery was done, infection treated, then we didn't have to continue to pace the child because the child's rates gradually improved a little bit and we could postpone putting a pacemaker. So that was the other situation where we have used this.
Thank you, sir.